Good afternoon, everybody. Assalamu alaikum to the Muslims out there who are watching, and good afternoon to any non-Muslims who are also watching this show today. Welcome to another episode of the Alternative Platform. Today we're going to have a very interesting debate stroke discussion, and true to our motto, something pushing the boundaries of conventional debate. Something quite, hopefully it's going to be quite lively, perhaps even a little bit inflammatory or explosive, but nevertheless, I personally really believe in freedom of speech and allowing everybody a platform to either vent their frustrations, vent their anger, vent their concerns, or simply explain their point of view in a democratic, so to speak, way. And allowing somebody from an opposing party to also express their refutations, rebuttals, or their side of the story. Today we're going to have, the topic at hand is going to be quite interesting. It's the English identity, and especially in the backdrop of racial disharmony and the elections and what it means to be British or English. I think it's going to be an interesting subject. What is the future of English identity? To be specific, and to discuss this issue, I have on my left Bill Baker, who is the organizer, or was the organizer of the Harrow Mosque demonstration, who is also a member of the English Defence Leauge and also a former member of English Democrats. And I should point out as well that he is also a nationalist activist. So Bill Baker, thank you very much first and foremost for coming down and participating.
I'd just like to correct you on one point. There was actually two Harrow Mosque demonstrations.
Okay.
The initial one I organised myself with several other English activists, and we had quite a substantial amount of people that were going to attend. In our discussions with the police and the local Muslim community and the Harrow secretary of the mosque, they ensured us that they would not put a formidable Shariah court in the mosque, and it was on the basis of that that we actually withdrew. When we withdrew, it was then taken up by Stop Islamification of Europe, which is a Stephen Gash group. It was no way an EDL event, as everybody says, where all the radicals got out and started screaming and shouting it was English Defence Leauge. It wasn't. The first initial one, as I said, was ourselves for England United. Second one was Stop Islamification.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you very much for that clarification. I'll wear myself, but in any case, let's continue. And on my right-hand side, I have Paul Williams, who is a convert to Islam, speaker and also senior researcher for the Muslim Debate Initiative. Thank you very much for coming down, Paul Williams.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. And I should also like to thank the Muslim Debate Initiative for actually bringing this debate together and for helping in organising this event. So without further ado, let's begin. What is the future of English identity? I'd really like to pass this question over to Bill, first and foremost, to give us an introduction. And also maybe mention what you personally are involved in and what your aims and objectives are and what your concerns are. Really, this is live. This is absolutely a free platform for you to say whatever you like, so feel free to express your opinions without any fear of...
Well, I'm here to express the views of a growing English dissent against current political situations and current religious situations where we're being fed media hype of Sharia law being included and run from the mosques on an arbitration factor. They're taking away the English identity itself, its voice. I mean, if we take, for instance, two EDL protesters recently, two brave lads, they've gone into a disused warehouse, which is to be a mosque in Dudley. Now, they've trespassed. It's not a criminal offence anymore, and you cannot be prosecuted for trespassing anymore. So the police have used officers with tasers to remove these two lads off the platform. They've then charged them with burglary and inciting racial hatred. Now, these guys that are patriots, they've gone out, they've joined the cause, which is the English Defence Leauge, and believe me, it is a growing cause, because as the English Defence Leauge is growing in stature on every march, you'll notice from their initial concept, when they got involved, was against troops being protested by Muslim extremists. And that's how the English Defence Leauge came about. And they've grown in stature. They're growing at every march. We started off with a couple of hundred marching, then 1,000, then 2,000. Recent marches, we've seen numbers of up to 6,000 to 8,000 heads. Now, these guys have got to have a voice. There's nothing out there that, on a political basis, that recognises English identity, and there's nothing that actually represents the English youth that are all coming of voting age, and a lot of them are voting age. A lot of them probably abstained from voting, which was wrong, because they've got no trust in the current political circumstances. They're being sold out by the Liberal Democrats, by the Conservatives, and by the Labour Party. Now, all I believe that we should see a fairness where England is one law, one nation. We have preachers, by whatever faith people want to choose to follow, by all means follow your faith, but the preachers are there to soothe our souls. We've got politicians to make and lawyers to make our laws, and the two shouldn't be mixed, and that is a problem we've got on the streets at the moment.
Okay, briefly, Paul, if you'd like to respond to what you've heard so far, and then we'll continue the discussion further.
Well, I'm English as well, born and bred in this country, and I love this country as well, as an Englishman and as a Muslim. My concern with organisations like the English Defence Leauge is that they're not all that they seem. I have evidence here that they are often racist and abusive to ethnic minorities, and particularly Muslims. And that's my main concern with EDL. For example, the Matthew Taylor in the Guardian newspaper said on Sunday the 13th.
Who's Matthew Taylor?
He's a journalist, a Guardian journalist. Sunday the 13th September 2009, he was talking about far-right supporters confront pro-Palestinian protesters. It says here, far-right supporters EDL were today involved in a standoff with pro-Palestinian demonstrators in central London. There were several brief confrontations as EDL activists chanted, "We hate Muslims," and "Muslims off our streets." And I would like to invite Bill now to disassociate himself with the racism, evidently the racism of EDL.
I disassociate myself with any racism, but the EDL is like any movement. You've got radical Muslims. Now, as you sit here as a moderate Muslim, you've got radical Muslims that are actually standing, calling their troops killers. Now, you're attracting radicals into the Islamic faith. The English Democrats are getting followers they're attracting radicals, but it doesn't make up the main body of the English Democrats.
Unfortunately,
it's not all of the English Democrats. It's a very, very small minority.
So you disassociate yourself with the racists in the English Defence Leauge.
Myself with
and what steps is your organisation taking to get rid of these racists in your organisation?
I cannot speak for the membership. Okay, for the leaders of the membership. I can only speak personally as a member, but there's a lot of members like myself who abhor the BNP, we abhor this C18, the thuggery, but we also abhor the jihadists and the people that are like recruiting Muslim youth off our streets to go and be trained abroad.
I'm not talking about that, I was talking about the EDL.
But they are interlinked. They are interlinked. Come on, there's radicals on both sides. You're picking on radicals that are going in.
No, I'm only talking about racism in your own movement. I'm not talking about anyone else.
There is no racism within the movement.
Well, I've just given examples of racism in your movement, reported in the Guardian in September.
These are not true members. Look, as I say,
they're not true members. How do we know they're not true members?
Right, let's look at it on this point. You'll get 20,000 fans that will rock up at a football match. Okay, let's say for Chelsea. 300 of those fans will cause a riot and start fighting with the police. Does that condemn every single one of them?
Okay. Can I draw your attention then to some racist statements that you've made that are in the public domain? There was one joke, in inverted commas, that you posted on Facebook, and I'll quote it here, and you can see the documentation yourself. And I apologise for the offensiveness of the remarks, but it's important that we realise what you have said publicly.
Okay.
It says here, and I quote, and this is on the 29th of July 2009, 11 o'clock. Andrex have come out with an Islamic toilet paper which has a print of Muhammad on it. Not only can you wipe your arse with it, but you get to colour him in as well.
Okay.
Did you say this?
If it was a joke that I passed on for a laugh, yes.
Okay. Did you say this? Is this your handwriting? Is this your writing or text?
It probably, I'm not sure. It might have been a joke that I passed on. I passed on several jokes.
Do you think?
I am not politically correct.
Are you defending this?
It's passed on as a joke, yes.
So you defend? You would still do this today?
It's a joke. The cross-racial jokes against different people's religious jokes, racial practice jokes, it's not a problem. I can't see a problem.
See, this is highly offensive and is bound to store up disorder and enmity between Muslims and people from your sections of the community. We must show respect between communities.
Paul, how can you have respect?
Okay. I've got more evidence of your racism, by the way. I've got a lot of it. Do you want me to give or should we move on?
Well, I think that's not necessary. I mean, the racism aside, I think nobody's perfect, and I'm sure a lot of Muslims have made similar jokes and offensive remarks against against English people,
Exactly
white
my
people.
point.
So, and in fairness to Bill, he has disassociated himself from racist elements within his party, and the argument could be levelled equally at Muslims. We are supposed to be a global party, an ummah, and within our ummah, as he rightly pointed out, we have extremist radicals who have said kill non-Muslims and so and so forth. And they are offended by those remarks. So do you also see a need to disassociate yourself from the likes of, for example, Al-Muhajirun, Hizb ut-Tahrir, and other radical elements? Or do you think, well, no, it's down to the common sense of the average layman to know that you're an individual, you're not part of those people, or do you constantly have to defend yourself, and the Muslims say, no, we've got also our bad apples?
Well, Muslims are constantly having to defend ourselves in the British media against all sorts of untruths and myths that are created. But Al-Muhajirun are extreme, and I certainly completely and utterly dissociate myself from them. They're provocative, their language is inflammatory, and they outrage everyone, I think, Muslims and non-Muslims alike. Hizb ut-Tahrir, from what I know of them, they don't advocate terrorism or violence, and they're a legitimate political organisation.
What
both
do they
here,
advocate, though?
but well, their main programme is to see the caliphate, the Islamic caliphate, re-established in Muslim countries, not in this country. And Majorun are unfortunately...
the Andalusi that was originally kicked out in the 15th century.
No, the caliphate, as I understand it, came to an end in the 1920s when the Ottoman Empire was wound up. That they seek to re-establish the caliphate in the Islamic world. Majorun obviously want to establish it in Britain, and that is completely wrong. You can't impose Sharia on people who are not Muslims, and that is Islamic teaching.
How can you separate? To me, Islam is an ideology. Now, part of your ideology incorporates Sharia law into the Islamic faith. How do you separate the two?
Well, Islamic law is simply if you like, the laws that we derive from the Quran and from the Sharia. The Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And it covers all aspects of life, from marriage, from domestic duties to honesty and commerce between neighbours, all sorts of things. It's not meant for, it's not designed for, and it's never intended to be applied to anyone else. It's the codes by which we live. You know, when we pray, how we pray.
Why are you trying to oppose it in your mosques upon people? Why are you trying
we're not trying to impose it on anyone. If you're a Muslim, you live by the commandments and laws of God.
You should see that's wrong. If you come to this country, you should live by the laws of the nation. God should always take second place, because what you've got to remember, there's a lot of people that are atheists. They don't have the religious values that a lot of people do. Now, my personal belief in all three of the Abrahamic faiths is that they are fairy tale religions. I don't begrudge anybody following them, but don't try and instow those values on our communities, because we don't want them. By taking away the rights of our English courts, our civil courts and our criminal courts, and issuing laws from your mosques, you're separating the community. You're segregating yourselves, and that is what's bringing the problems on the streets.
So do you believe...
You made a comment like calling me a racist earlier. Yes, I'm untoward sometimes. I'll sit indoors, I'll have a beer, I'll post a joke that I think's funny. Some of it may have, but I don't see it as being politically wrong.
No, I've other more recent comments, which I won't bring in because I've been asked not to, of an inflammatory nature which you've made about blacks, but I've been asked not to bring that in. So there's a consistent pattern, it seems, here. But just going back to Sharia is not imposed upon Muslims. It's an expression of how we live our life for God. And I come back to this question of English identity, because that's what our discussion is on. My understanding of Englishness, if that's such a thing, is that Christianity is part of the head of state. The Queen is both the head of state and the head of the Church of England. And Christianity permeates the laws of this country.
That is English culture. The Queen,
yes,
exactly.
That's
my point.
The royalty
has always been.
So are you a secularist? You want to roll back the Church and the Queen and get rid of all our Christian values in our society?
England is a society where we've always had the Queen as our figurehead. Pierre is the head of the church, but she is our figurehead. Any of the role of it, and that's something that we've been brought up to support. We're not going to diss our Queen and her religious beliefs and the Christian faiths just to accommodate other religions. We welcome your other religions into the country, but at the moment we see Islam, as I say, as an ideological, political stance, and that is what we're fighting. It's easy to use Taqiyya, for instance.
Well, now, what's Taqiyya in your understanding?
Taqiyya, in my understanding, was something that was set up years ago where Muslims had to lie when they lived in communities where they were smaller minorities, and they had to lie about their faith just to be accepted into the community. The further advancement, and then once they'd grown in stature and in numbers, then to use whatever forces they could accumulate to take over. That is my understanding of tequila.
Right, it's not my understanding. I'm not an Islamic scholar, so I don't pretend to be able to give an authoritative definition, but I've looked into this, and my understanding from the Quran and the Sunnah, I've come across three main ways that tequila, as you call it, is applicable. One, in the Holy Quran, chapter 16, ayah 106, it says that if under immediate threat of death, you with your lips say something that is not Islamic, say you renounce God even, that won't be necessarily counted, as long as your heart is still with God, that you can do that under imminent threat of death or extreme torture. The other example is when the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said war is deceit in Hadith 52. And I mean, today, for example, give an example of this.
How can you say
what war is deceit? Did you have a problem with that?
I do have a problem with it, because if you look in current history, it's like Islamic forces and Islamic states have created more war since the end of the Second World War than any others.
Right. Well, we can go into that and Britain's foreign policy and the wars we've been involved in.
Incorrect as well. When you said since the Second World War, put you right there. The Islamic State ended well before the Second World War.
So Iraq can put that on Islamic states?
That's right.
No.
That's right.
What are they? Secularists then?
Yes. And also
predominantly Muslims.
the last Islamic state was the Ottoman Empire, which ended in 1924.
So the war between Iran and Iraq then wasn't...
No, they're just nation states like America and England, although they are predominantly inhabited by Muslims.
So
I think what it comes down to, I mean, I'd like to get to the nitty-gritty, is really lack of knowledge and ignorance on both parts. And I think from what I've heard and from what I've seen from members of the EDL, a lot of their concerns and their anger are built around fears perpetrated by a minority of extremists within the Muslim community, and rightly so, and I completely understand and empathise.
But we don't see the majority of Muslims standing up and identifying the minority in their ranks.
Exactly.
If the Muslims were to come out and say,
Absolutely.
right, here's the perpetrators of violence,
Absolutely.
these are the guys
Absolutely.
you want,
You know what?
hand them over to the judicial system,
Definitely.
and then...
I 100% agree. I 100% agree.
Can I object to that? We do reject these people. I have a friend, Abdullah, who's the Emir of MDI. Even last Sunday, he was arguing against a supporter of theirs. And you see, because they're such a small minority, it's not to find them. It's not as if they're all over the place. I don't know any people from this organisation personally.
But they have a big voice. Unfortunately, they're the ones who take the media headlines.
The media magnifies, gives them a huge megaphone, and it's splashed all over the Daily Express. And then people think, oh my God, why aren't Muslims denouncing? Of course we denounce these people, like you denounce Nazis,
But
presumably.
no, why don't more Muslims get out on the street and join in the protesting against the Sharia law?
No, that's a different issue. That Sharia is part of Islam. It's the way we live our lives before our Creator. It's how we pray, it's how we eat, it's the marriages we have and so on. We're not going to protest against our Creator. That's not what we do.
Bill, let me ask you specifically, what are some of the specific concerns you've got, some of the specific fears about Muslims?
I have a specific fear. It's not actually against Muslim itself. As I said, anyone can follow any faith they like. My personal, I'm an evolutionist and I don't believe in religions as such, but I don't begrudge anyone that belief. My concerns with Sharia law is that we've seen Sharia law in Islamic states abroad, predominantly Muslim countries, where they're cutting hands off people. They're burying women up to their head in stones and stoning them for adultery. How can we allow certain concepts of Sharia law into this country? It doesn't bring the rest of it with it.
But
so
I want to ask you genuinely, do you seriously believe that one day England will
there's
be...
already been
do you really
incidents,
believe?
there's incidents reported of where like children within Muslim communities in this
I'm
country...
asking, no, do you seriously believe that England will one day implement Sharia law and start cutting off hands in England? Do you really believe that this is a legitimate fear?
I believe that if we do not stem the flow now of immigration into this country, stand back, stop total immigration in this country, work with the people that we've already got in this country to establish and restore communities how they were 10 years ago, before the Labour got in, or 13 years before they get in, and get some social unity among the communities, then we are going to head on a very, very
dangerous path.
And I think we're going to have a lot more civil strife.
So you think that, I mean, one day will become like Saudi Arabia, say, and that is your main fear?
No, I don't, because the English wouldn't allow it to happen.
Right. So if it will never happen, what are you so afraid of? And what
because we're having to get to fight out on the streets and fight for the cause to stop it happening. We should have politicians that are actually stopping it at the top, but they're so busily appeasing immigrants and the Muslim community that like nothing's happening for us. we're getting pushed aside all the time as an English community, as the English culture. We're getting pushed back all the time, and it's got to stop. If the politicians are not going to get out there and represent us, then we're going to get out and represent ourselves. And if it means like organisations like the EDL and other like IOE, UDA, March for England, England United, all these groups like forming and getting out on the street marching, that's the way it's got to be. And you will never stop it. We've had David Cameron went into Dudley the other day. He said once he's Prime Minister, he's going to ban the EDL. I mean, why isn't he banning like... They took the two lads in Dudley and locked them up. Why didn't they take Chowdhury and lock him up, give him the same treatment that they've just given these two lads in Dudley?
I think that only makes the situation worse because it just creates further enmity.
They're victimising the English voice. And it's wrong, totally wrong.
And ultimately the people who suffer are the ordinary folk. And they're the ones who end up fighting each other, but the people in power really don't, I personally think, don't care about either party. They don't really care about the Muslims, they don't really care about yourselves, and they just care about the money and the power, holding on to the power. So, I mean, what it comes down to really is we have to really find some common ground and try to understand each other mutually, and hopefully not let it escalate into physical violence. And the only way that we can really understand where we're coming from is to have dialogue such as this, where, for example, perhaps if you have a misconception about Sharia, maybe the best thing to do is approach a Muslim and say, look, what is Sharia? Does it mean that you should implement your penal laws, such as cutting the hand of the thief, which is clearly written in the Quran? Does it mean you should impose that law onto us, the indigenous native...
as I say, we've had reports where in Muslim communities in this country, children that are, youths that are misbehaving themselves are actually being dragged into the mosques to be like chastised by the imams or your religious leaders and not actually for the courts, and that is wrong.
When you say chastised, do you mean like simply reprimanded, or do you mean lashed?
We're not sure. As I say, there's several articles that have come out which I should have actually bought notes. I actually said to Paul, do you want me to bring notes? But
okay, fine. Paul, if you'd like to quickly respond, is that a legitimate fear that the Sharia law will one day supersede...
It's a fear. I don't think it's legitimate. Let me just tell you a bit about myself. Before I became a Muslim, I was not too dissimilar to the views that Bill holds. I called myself an English sort of patriot, and unfortunately I became quite Islamophobic. And it reached a point when I realised that I was beginning to hate Muslims, and I actually remember boycotting my local halal shop in my local area, thinking, oh, I don't want to give money to them. And I thought, this is madness. And I actually went to my local mosque, Regent's Park Mosque, down the road from where I live, and thought, I'm going to learn what Islam is like, because I know the media sometimes misrepresent issues. And I learned about Islam. I was a Christian at the time, committed Christian. And I discovered that Islam is not what I thought it was. Once I actually studied the Quran, talked to actual Muslims, knowledgeable Muslims, and I thought, wow, this is a beautiful religion. It's a very simple religion of faith in one God, believing and following all the prophets of God, whether it be Jesus or Muhammad or Moses, peace be upon them all. And I thought, wow, if only more people knew about this extraordinary faith. And what I learned was very different from the kind of image of Islam and Sharia that even today you read in the Daily Express and the Daily Mail and some of the other newspapers. And Sharia law is not meant, as I've already said, is not meant to be imposed on anyone else. It's not meant for you, it's meant for Muslims who want to follow their creator, the one God. We're all invited to follow. And I believe very much there is a God, and it matters because our lives and our deaths and our life after death, how we behave will determine our eternal destiny. These things matter.
Bill, before you continue, unfortunately we have to cut into a break. I know you'll have plenty of chance to refute and express your views. So we'll cut into a break in a second, but perhaps after the break I'd like to also touch on, yes, you said that Islam is a religion of peace and it's a beautiful religion, but unfortunately the reality is that it's been hijacked by a minority, a handful of extremists who have really portrayed Islam to be something quite, something to be feared, and indeed that has given rise to organizations such as the EDL, which actually came about as a reaction. So let's try to maybe get to the root, the cause of the problem. And hopefully we'll tackle that issue after the break. So viewers, I hope you'll join us in a couple of minutes. Good afternoon. Welcome back to the Alternative Platform. And today we'll be discussing what is the future of English identity. So a bit of a taboo subject, but something that really needs to be addressed openly, honestly. And I really think that if we move in the direction of, rather than calling each other personal names or labeling each other as racist, it doesn't really get us anywhere. We'll just go round in circles. Let us really deal with the factual issues, some of the fears, and try to alleviate them or bring about some kind of understanding. Ultimately, we'll need to live with each other side by side. So what do we do? Do we simply disassociate ourselves from each other? Do we try and get along, or do we try and establish one state and to the exclusion of others? What are some of the practical solutions? Now, I'd like to ask Paul Williams some of the popular opinions throughout the country from the indigenous native English people are that there's a perception that native British people are treated like second-class citizens in their own country. And that is a fact, that is a concern, whether you like it or not. And they see asylum seekers coming over as immigrants, and they are pushed to the front of queues for housing, jobs and benefits. And millions of native indigenous white people are unemployed, yet the politicians continue to allow foreign workers to flood into the country, taking their jobs, claiming benefits, costing billions of pounds. So these are popular fears and concerns raised by the indigenous English people of this country. Are they right? And if not, what can we do to alleviate their concerns and break down some of the stereotypes? Are right, what can we do to solve and redress some of the imbalances that are prevalent in society? Are the problems really more political and economic rather than racial and religious? Perhaps that is something that has been blurred as well. And let us really get to the heart of the matter. Let's be honest. Let's talk about some of the problems and how we can perhaps solve them.
You raised an awful lot of issues there. I'm going to try and deal with some of them in a few minutes. I mean, I'm part of the indigenous white English part of this country, indigenous as Bill is, so I don't see myself as a part. I just happen to be also a Muslim as well, thanks be to God.
Political difference as well. I mean, you are on the lines of a socialist. You haven't have any values on nationalism, surely, because everything that you portrayed to me is as a socialist.
No, I'm not a socialist. I'm not here to discuss my politics, really. But
it was one of the questions that he asked. He asked about
if I could respond to the question, okay. Bill, please. I do want to reassure English people who are not Muslims that you have nothing to fear from Islam, okay? When we don't want you to stop eating pork and drinking alcohol and gambling. You can do that. You're entitled to do that from Islamic understanding. We don't want to ban that. But I think there have been problems. For example, I mean, I'm not an expert on this. I don't pretend to be a political analyst, but I could speculate that in some English communities in England have felt overwhelmed by a large influx of people from a very different culture from certain communities without being consulted by this. So I can acknowledge that. And without that consultation, that breeds resentment and hatred and prejudice. But as a Muslim, talking about Shariah,
patriotism.
Well, it also breeds hatred as well, as we know. But I do want to stress that, like Catholics, like Jews, we want to live according to the law of God, as we understand, in a way that respects other people, other religions, Jews and Catholics, and the indigenous English population. We don't want to impose our beliefs on anyone. And I would ask Bill, can you give one single example where Sharia law has been imposed on anyone in England who is not a Muslim? Because I'm not aware of any example. And I think that you talked earlier on about the media hype, to use your term, about mosques and Sharia law, and I think you're absolutely right. The press I read, like the Daily Express, is very extreme in magnifying tiny minorities of very extreme Muslims and saying, well, this is what Islam's like, it's a terrible threat to our way of life, just as people might say, well, the BNP doesn't represent English people either.
You're doing the same as Khalil was doing earlier, you're giving me two questions at once. Let's take a step back. Now, let's go back to Sharia law, okay? Now, we've got people like Anjem Chowdhury, who portrays himself as a Sharia law judge. Now, he must be practicing in some Sharia facilities where people are actually going in these facilities. Muslims, you've got no need of like 800 courts or whatever they are in the country. if practicing Muslims are not going and attending these courts and obeying what they're saying? What is wrong with using our existing courts? Why
Okay,
can't
let me answer that directly, because take the example of marriage, for example. I've been to Muslim marriages. Muslims have to get married twice in England. You get married in the mosque as part of a religious ceremony, if you like, and then get married in a registrar's office. Now, that is not the case when it comes to, if I was a good Christian and I went to church, the vicar or the priest would, in one act, so to speak, be able to solemnise the marriage, and it would be recognised in law. Now, that is one aspect why I would want English law to recognise, as it does for Christians, as it does for Jews, because of justice and equality under the law, that we should have our marriages recognised by the state. And the moment it doesn't happen, and that's to discriminate against Muslims. But I'm not aware of any other Sharia issue, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, where Muslims say, oh, I want the English law to be changed to recognise Sharia. That's the only one I'm aware of.
Okay, we've had recent where what they're saying now is schools that are predominantly with Muslim youth and Muslim children in the school, that they want the schools now to be run on the Sharia. And these are articles that are going out on the web, where you've got people stating clearly, oh, there's like 700 Muslim children in this school, there's only 400 like English, it should be a Muslim school. How can we have that?
Do you think there should be Catholic schools, Jewish schools,
I believe
Protestant schools?
we should take all politics, religions out of school, leave the politics till after the kids have done their education, leave the religion for their parents to decide for them. Let's get the education system purely concentrating on giving them a career choices that they can get through this life.
But the English way of doing things at the moment, and it seems to have it's supported by law, is that faith communities, you can have a Christian school or a Jewish school or a Catholic school where the ethos of the school is Christian or Islamic or Jewish, and that is respecting the religious diversity in our society. If you want a more, say, French model where the state is completely secularized, where women can't wear hijab, where they're about to ban the niqab, then that's fine. But as an Englishman and as a Muslim, I want our faith to be respected in school and in the wider social community.
Why do you want to take faith into schools? Let the kids get in there and learn.
It's always been in schools. It's always been. We're not like the United States where there's a separation between
the extreme values that Islam wants to.
But
put
Islam
in,
is not
Bill,
it's not
if
extreme
I can
values.
ask you a question, Bill, from what you've said, my understanding is that, well, on the one hand, you're saying, I don't mind anybody practicing their own faith and their religion. They're entitled to do so. That's a personal thing.
Yes.
What I'm against is them imposing it on us, which is a legitimate point.
Yes.
So would you be against a Muslim who would like to go to a mosque and perhaps raise an issue for arbitration matters in a personal capacity within
yes, I would.
In the Sharia form,
preacher.
because it doesn't actually affect you, it doesn't infringe on your rights, it's not imposing it on you. They just want to go to a mosque.
Where do you draw the line, though, Khalil? Where do you draw the line?
That's a good point.
Where do you draw the line on Sharia law in the mosque?
On
the point that Paul said, and Paul and I
It's
had
not
this
criminal
discussion on Friday, I believe if Muslim marriages, Islamic marriages, by all means have them in the mosques, and they should be able to register their marriage through that mosque. I agree with that, as in the Christian faith and the Jewish faith.
But
that is Sharia, and that's people up to. When Rome, the Archbishop of Canterbury, said precisely that point, he got crucified in the press, and English people were saying, oh, this is terrible Sharia law recognised by the common law. But you want Sharia law
marriage
recognised by
ceremonies,
English law.
funeral ceremonies, we don't have a problem with.
Good. Right.
But what we have a problem, what I have a problem
what is your problem then?
What I have a problem is that you got like in the Islamic faith, it's very, very untoward women. Now you're going to have, if say on a misogynist, excuse my pronunciation, but you've got to have a man that is literally against women, dictating a divorce and giving all the rights to the man.
No.
Because of the fact that they treat women as a second class within their
again, it's one
So
part
are you saying you actually care about that Muslim woman being abused by
she should have the rights under English law to come under English law if there's a divorce of that sort of nature. Should be done in their own civil court and away from the mosque.
But
I'll reiterate,
is it
not put a preacher in charge of civil disputes.
Right.
But it already happens. That with respect, I have a friend of mine who's a Catholic priest, Father Nicholas Kavanagh, at St James Church in Marylebone in London, and he's also a judge, so to speak, on the group which in the Catholic Church which arbitrates on marriages and issues annuls, and Roman Catholic women and men go to him wanting their marriages.
Does that then
annulled.
not have to go and be registered?
No, that is recognised in law. That marriage then ceases to exist if it's annulled in the Catholic tribunal, it's called tribunal. Now, I have no problem with that. I respect the Catholic faith. If Christians want to abide by Catholicism, good. But what you're denying is Muslims to do the same. Jews have this, Jews can do it, but you're saying, no, none of these people should be able to practice their faith according to their own churches and so on.
None of these other faiths promote. See, when you say the Jews and the Catholics, they do have their arbitration courts, yes, they
Tribunals.
do. But Sharia law goes a lot deeper than that. I mean, you're taking a minor section of Sharia law and putting it in the mosque. What's to stop the rest of it following over?
I think that is really the
What
key.
is the problem?
The key fear.
Because
That is the key fear. And if you'd like to address it, as Bill said, he doesn't mind if Sharia law is restricted to personal issues that don't
It should be
infringe on his
constrained.
rights. Yes, right.
But indeed, let me reassure you, because that is all it ever will be.
Right,
Because
there you go.
because until we have an Islamic state instituted, a real one, not a monarchy or some kind of dictatorship imposed by certain Western powers, without going
So
into
you're
that.
against the monarchy?
Let me finish. There's no place, as
A lot of
my
non-Muslims
understanding,
are against the monarchy as well,
for
though.
a monarchical system, the caliph, if my understanding is correct, should be elected by the people. It's a democratic thing, according to the Quran and the Sunnah. I have no problem. The only time that all the laws, the Sharia...
my understanding...
Can I finish, Bill? Because
Okay.
I keep interrupting. The only time all the laws of the Sharia come into force is in an Islamic society. But in our society, which is not an Islamic society and may never be Islamic society, it is not appropriate, nor is it mandated, that the Sharia should be on anyone. Okay, so there's a misunderstanding here about Islamic teaching.
It's only because the Islamic extremists are only a minority. If they were to gain an advantage...
There will always be a
and gain
minority, though, Bill. This is really the point.
they're
There
not
will
being
always
Islamic.
be,
They're
just like
not being
no,
Islamic.
they're a growing
Just like-
minority.
Are they?
They're a growing minority.
I don't know any
Oh,
extremists.
come on, look. If you take from 15 years ago, what did we have? We had about 900,000 Muslims in this country. Now we've got 1.3, 1.4 million.
2 million, I
That's is it close on 2 million? There I go. So that in 7-8 years is doubled in numbers.
Yeah, because
When in
immigration-
another 7 years it doubles
Yes,
again, we've got
but
4 million.
this is fear-mongering,
7
because there's
years
nothing to
after
do
that,
with
it
the
doubles
issues,
again.
to do with the
It
Sharia
needs
law.
to be stopped.
If you talk to Islamic scholars and you look at the evidences in the Quran and the Sunnah, okay, in an Islamic state, the Sharia is operating in its fullness, but not in a situation where we're a small
You cannot
minority of
separate
people.
Sharia law from the Islamic faith.
No, but it is not imposed. You cannot
But that's
impose
different
it.
to saying that
You
they
cannot
are
impose it.
seeking to establish Sharia in this country,
Yeah,
in
but
England.
that's a myth.
It's only a handful of people who are actually saying that, and really there's a difference of opinion, and they're
So
very
why aren't more
minority.
Muslims coming forward
Right,
and saying,
okay, so that is
why
the
aren't
issue.
more Muslims getting out like...
Do you know why? Because
you've got
most Muslims...
Shez Mahoob of the British Muslim Secular Democracy. Shez, I'm sure you've met Shez previously. I mean, you've got guys like that. They're a very small minority, and they are actually coming out and standing out against Sharia law. But they are a very, very small minority of the Islamic...
Can I tell you what Sharia is about? The
society.
Sharia is about how we pray. It's about how we do wudu. It's about our wives. It's about dealing in commerce.
It's
It
how you
covers
chastise them,
everything.
it's how you beat them,
No,
it's how you behead
no.
people.
The-
It's how you
the-
take a hand off them
no,
for
no,
stealing.
no, no, no.
That's the one aspect of it. That is the penal
But
system.
how can,
That's the
that is
penal
my whole
system.
point. How can you separate the aspects? You cannot take a piece of law and put it into position and do the
well,
and do
well,
away
But
with
you
the rest
can,
of
you
it.
can
can.
in England, because we're not, and I repeat, not, apart from a few
It's a min-
infinitesimally taught extremists, and seeking to impose Sharia. And I come back to you, can you give one example where Sharia law has seeked to be imposed on the English people? I'm not aware of a simple example.
I
You
think
mentioned English
recently there
schools.
was actually some local authority I saw on that they're not allowing barbecues and people cooking pork in case it offends your Muslim neighbours.
No.
I believe that has come
I bet you
about.
Muslims are not blind. I bet you politically correct liberals
But this,
are
then
behind
how do
this.
how do we separate? Now we're coming on to the
You see,
political
PC
aspects.
liberals are causing us as Muslims problems, like in councils up and down
Then
the
why aren't
country.
Muslims standing up
But let
against
me
the
finish this.
socialists?
There are examples which I've read where local authorities in England, English councils, have banned Christmas and talking about happy holidays in December because they don't want to offend Muslims. This is rubbish. We do not. We want Christians to have their churches and their monasteries and the synagogues. We don't want to ban anyone.
So why
It's
aren't
the PC
the
liberals
moderate
who are
Muslims that want to live as you say you want to live?
But-
Why aren't you getting out demonstrating against these councils and say, look, leave the English
we
alone,
have.
and you'd have a better understanding from
Well,
the
we
English.
do
But at
protest.
the moment,
We do
everybody's sitting
protest.
back,
No.
and the
What you
English
do-
are getting trouble
if you only read
constantly.
the, if you
and
only
we're
read
not
the
gonna
Daily
have it
Express, if
anymore.
you only read the mainstream media who distort what Islam is about, you will not hear this. You're absolutely right. What you've got to do is extend your ear to what Muslims themselves are saying through the Muslim Council of Britain, through TV channels like this Lamb channel, and
You
through,
said Muslim Council of Britain, there is no direct authority for Muslims in this country that speaks for all Muslims.
No, but people who do speak out, who issue press releases and get on TV shows, have said endlessly that terrorism is to be condemned. We don't want to impose Shariah on people. We want Christians to have their festivals. But people don't hear this because they're listening to the Daily Express and Sky TV and Fox News, which are giving a completely distorted understanding of Islam.
If there were enough
admit
Muslim voices complaining on these issues, they would make the mainstream
I have been
press.
complaining for the last 4 years. Does anyone listen to me? No. So I don't have the ear of Murdoch. I can't say, Murdoch, would you please report this accurately? I can't talk to the guy. I mean, how much, do you actually seriously want me to ring up Murdoch? I never get to talk to him.
Well,
we're a minority. Most Muslims, like in the Bangladeshi community, correct me if I'm wrong, are actually very poor in East London. They don't have the resources and the power to access the media. The media distort, like they did before with the Jews, the Roman Catholics in the 19th century, and hopefully Britain will change and will learn to accept the diversity that exists here and not be afraid of it. There's nothing to be afraid of Muslims. We want to coexist with yourself and Christians and Jews.
I don't believe in a multicultural state. I believe in a multi-ethnic society. Now, where multiculturalism has never worked.
What about the Jews then? What are you going to do with the Jews? Are you going to kick them out?
They're an ethnic group. Nobody's going to pick on the Jews.
Orthodox Jews teach the understanding, halakha understanding of food is very similar to Islamic and kosher food. They had their rules to do with women and much more restrictive than Islamic teaching. Would you seek to ban Jews and close down mosques?
No.
Okay, well, what's your problem with Muslims then?
And you actually meant, you didn't mean mosques, what did you mean there?
Synagogues.
Synagogues, I think that's the word you was looking for.
Point taken.
I don't have a problem with anyone practising their faith. The Jews are not sending people over to Israel to train as suicide bombers. The Roman Catholics are not sending people to Rome.
Jews are some Jews, and not all of them, I hasten to say that some Jews are pro-Zionist and do support with all their effort a state which is terrorising Palestinians in Gaza at the moment. The largest prison camp in the world, where Gaza Palestinians are being terrorised and imprisoned by the Israeli state, and they do support that. But they're never called terrorists. The Zionists in England, oh no. But when Muslims support resistance movements in Afghanistan or in occupied territories or Afghanistan, they're called terrorists. It's double standards, man.
Okay, I agree with you. We do have an oppressive police state. Give me your opinion on these two lads that have been locked up in Dudley. Do you think they've been treated harshly?
I'm afraid I don't know anything about that case at all. I can't comment.
Okay, well, it was actually a media blackout. It was a couple of days before the elections. They went into the house, which was going to be built into a mosque, climbed up onto the roof, and they hung up "No More Mosques" in Dudley, which is their right to do so, to protest. The Muslim community then went, the Muslim guys in the area, then went, get the guys off the roof or we're going to... Now the police kowtowing to the Muslims went up and forced the lads off the roof. They've actually broken one of their arms. When they came into court one day, one of the lads busted arm, a busted up face, and they've held them on burglary charges and racial hatred. And they've actually remanded them for a simple trespass. The reason they've done that is trespassing is no longer an offence. You can't be prosecuted for it. Now you tell me that is fair treatment.
I can't comment on this. I have knowledge of it. I haven't heard all the facts. I haven't looked at all the issues. I am a bit disturbed that the English Defence Leauge want to stop Muslims worshipping mosques. That's the implication of this.
Yes, because it could equally be argued that how would you feel if two Muslims went up on top of a church and tried to hold some kind of a demonstration?
Exactly. Good point.
And they would probably actually be killed. I don't think that would really get away. That's a personal opinion. It's down to personal opinion, and it's an isolated incident.
We're talking about the state and the oppressive police state that we've got currently, and it's actually the Labour Party and the Socialists are causing this oppression. But the English are the most oppressed nation within the four countries that make up the British Isles, and we are 5/6 of the voting majority.
Can I ask you, Paul? I mean, what percentage of the population do actually Muslims comprise and constitute? And is it a sizable enough population to warrant such a fear? And that there's a perception that we have so much influence in politics in this country, and we're changing things so radically beyond the pale of recognition, and that one day this is going to become like either Africa or India or Saudi Arabia.
I think as I've said already, and I could be wrong, I think it's approximately 2 million people in this country. It's a very young Muslim community in terms of age. The Bangladeshi community, I understand, very youthful community. It's not full of old people, but young people. only true that Muslims had such influence, because if only it were true. Bring back
But earlier on-
sorry, Bill, I'm just answering. Then we would bring back our troops from Afghanistan and Iraq, and we stop meddling in other countries' affairs. I only wish it was true, but it shows our powerlessness that all the three main parties, whoever's going to become Prime Minister, all support the war in Afghanistan, including the Liberal Democrats. If we had power, that wouldn't be the case. So I think that shows how powerless we are. Unfortunately, the highest illiteracy rates, correct me if I'm wrong, are amongst the Muslim community, the greatest amounts of poverty amongst the Muslim community, and this is a terrible affair. It's not true in other countries, like the United States, a number of Muslims. They tend to be more middle-class professionals, well-educated. For some reason, perhaps to do with the demography and the history of Muslim countries, some of them have now come here, and they tend to be impoverished. Enough here for Muslims. We've been here before, historically, as English people, to speak as an Englishman now, when we feared that alien and strange religion called Catholicism. There's an alien, and they had to eat the body, drink the blood of Christ. It was seen as completely un-English. We've been here with the Jew riots again in the 1930s against Jews in this area. The Muslims are the new Jews, and we're being singled out as a problem community that needs to be targeted and surveillance and worried about. Alarmist stories about Shariah law.
Who is singling you out? Who is actually singling you out?
You are, for a start.
No,
the media is to blame as well.
And the media. I'm not saying you're to blame, but the media is to blame.
A lot of Muslims are singling themselves out, and they're putting themselves in the limelight by their actions. Their actions are demonstrating against troops. And
Sure. That is a minority, and that is something I would like to tackle after the break. We have to cut into another break, unfortunately. Bill, I would like to talk, and Paul as well, in the next part, as to some of the causes behind those extremists. For example, it's a lot to do with foreign policies of this country that has actually bred that. Yeah. And then really we have to address the causes. Because 20 years ago,
I believe we should concentrate more on internal policies.
Okay, that's something we'll discuss after.
But they are related. They are related. Just like the Catholics were seen as subversive and dangerous to the Elizabethan state because Catholics were seen as allies of Spain, now we're seen as dangerous because we support the Palestinians and against the occupation of Muslim countries. Right. The dynamic is similar. We've been here before in English history and repeating the same mistakes. We're demonising the communities, whether it be Catholics, Jews or Muslims. We've been here before. There's nothing new
Thank you very much. We have to cut into another ad break, and after I hope you'll join us again for this very entertaining and lively debate. So we'll see you in a couple of minutes. Thank you. Welcome back to the Alternative Platform. We're talking about the future of English identity today, and during break time we were just discussing, Bill, about political correctness, and I think we agree on many issues here, and I'd like to really explore this in a bit more detail. I personally think that political correctness has done a disservice to Muslims in many cases. It's just gone really crazy and out of control to the point that we are again further demonized, and it doesn't really help us. Most of the Muslims that I know have nothing against nativity plays, have nothing against, I mean, I've heard some ludicrous stories like Baba Black Sheep has been banned because of the word black, you know, and I just think when I heard that, it actually really enraged me.
It creates animosity.
Absolutely. I was the first one to think this is just absolutely stupid, you know, and I don't blame English people, white people, for thinking, you know, well, what are these foreigners doing? They're coming over here and changing our way of life, changing our laws, but who's really behind it? That is really what I want to get at, because certainly, as far as I know, it's not the Muslims. And just to touch on that, nativity plays or banning St. George's Day or Christmas, you know, and these things, I don't know of any Muslims who are really actively trying to promote this and trying to get this implemented. So let's talk about political correctness first of all.
Well, I see that the actual term political correctness in itself is a lie, because how can I, as a nationalist now, have something in common with someone that's a socialist and see it as being politically correct? What's correct for a socialist that wants to open all the borders, let free flow of immigration come in? I don't see that as being correct. To me, it's incorrect. So I'm actually thinking that the whole politically correct module has gone out though. I mean, Paul touched on a note earlier that it isn't actually the Muslims that are creating these animosities. It is the local authorities and do-good councillors. And most of these are socialist and they're not taking into account how the nationalists, how the English indigenous people feel about these issues.
Or even the Muslims, because actually a lot of Muslims will be against it.
Yes, they would. But then why don't we see more Muslims getting out and protesting? I know you said earlier, but let's have communal protests.
Absolutely.
Let's get the Muslims, the English out together. Every time one of these councils pass one of these ridiculous laws, let's have group participation and go and tell them.
Maybe that is the solution. That is the solution.
I've been told that Muslims have been protesting. One local council abolished Christmas and installed Winterval, I understand, and the Muslims protested about this, said, look, if you do this, we're the people that are going to suffer because you're doing it for us. We don't want this.
But the problem is they're
Christmas.
not given much publicity.
No.
Maybe that is
we'll
what
back again to the
we'll
media.
get publicity in numbers. If we get out in numbers and start standing together then, as you said, against these, look, I'm never going to change my values on Sharia law, and I'm never going to change my values on open immigration policies. It's just something that I can't do. But the communities that are here do need to start standing together and demonstrating against the socialist councils that are called problems.
How about that? EDL and Muslims together united to protest? Do you think that's feasible?
I'm going to upset you. I'm sorry. I don't think so, because unfortunately what fuels a lot of English Defence Leauge discourse is, and to mention this again, it is Islamophobic, xenophobic, and often racist. Now, we might don't go down that path again, but I want to talk about also how Britain's foreign policy, or its foreign policy, if you like, is actually generating extremism
which has been generated from Scotland anyway.
And the extremism that is overlooked. For example, I've mentioned this before, when sections of the Jewish community go over to Israel and actively support during recent wars against the Palestinians. No one branded them extreme. No one locked them up and called them terrorist supporters at all. But some people get very, very upset and angry when we invade countries like Iraq, kill 500,000 plus civilians, and then they want to retaliate by killing civilians here. Now, I condemn that. The Quran, in no uncertain terms, says you cannot kill civilians and non-combatants. But you can see the link between Her Majesty's government's foreign policy and the way some people become extremists because of what our country does. And I want to dwell on that, because it's not like there are isolated extremists who want to Sharia law. Some people become extreme because of what our government does, the English mainly government does.
No, it's not an English mainly government. Our government has been dictated by Scottish, Welsh and Irish policy over the last 13 years. England does not have its own parliament, whereas you've got the Welsh Assembly, you've got the Scottish Parliament and you've got the Irish Parliament. We don't have our own parliament, and that is a problem. That is something we need. If you looked at the voting majority and they actually put it to a referendum and start letting the people decide for themselves, a lot of people would vote to come out of the EU and to reinstate an English Parliament. And I think a lot of that would actually quell a lot of this discord that's going on.
Sure. Apart from the technicality behind what constitutes the Parliament and the background behind that, would you at least agree that a lot of the problems that you have with Muslims is really down to the minority of extremists?
I don't have a problem with a Muslim following his faith.
Sure.
I do have a
But
problem
the
with a
extremists,
Muslim who tries to impose Sharia law.
Sure. But the extremists, let's say the likes of Anjem Choudary, for example, the likes of Anjem Choudary, those extremists you have a problem with. Now, what is actually causing those extremists to have a big vote? And it's surely the foreign policies of this country. Would you at least agree that there is a correlation?
Come on, people like Anjem Choudary, he's not cared about foreign policy or anything. He just wants to self-praise, stick himself on a platform and be noticed on the events of his... he wouldn't care if like the Iraq was going on or not. He would find another excuse to get up and make a fool of himself.
Well, okay, apart from him, then there are a lot of Muslims. Obviously, we know because we talk to Muslims, and I personally, obviously, I know Muslims, and I can tell you for a fact, a lot of Muslims are very, very angry at the foreign policies of this country.
Okay, let me put it another way.
Against Afghanistan,
if we pulled
against
out,
Israel.
if all the foreign troops pulled out of Afghanistan, do you believe then it's right that the Taliban can go and slaughter and carry on as they have been? With their like cruel ways?
Well, let me ask you as well. You cast your memory back a couple of decades ago. We never had all these problems, and that's because you know the British troops weren't in it.
I agree. Pull out and let them kill each other off.
What? Yeah.
It's only the do-gooders that like are trying to save each other there. Pull their troops out, because their troops are not worth losing their lives. Let them kill each other, and then we'll deal with the women.
Well,
But then,
this is
if
where
we
I
pull our
agree- I
troops
agree
out,
with
there
you.
is going to be thousands and thousands of deaths, and they're going to say, why didn't we do
So
something?
in Iraq, however horrible Saddam Hussein was, and he was extremely horrible, it caused the death of over 500,000 innocent civilians. We did that. Our government, and American government, and NATO troops did that. So I don't buy this. In terms of this stack of dead bodies, we have caused far more than the tyranny.
I agree.
So maybe we
I
can
agree on the
foreign
issue.
policy. Maybe we can
I
agree on
do
foreign
agree.
policy.
But at the end of the day, our troops are there out of loyalty and duty. They go where they are told. The government make the policies. Stop condemning our troops.
I'm not condemning the troops.
No, but
I'm not mentioning the troops. I mentioned government
Okay.
foreign policy. I'm not going to criticise soldiers.
Okay, because our soldiers are only doing their duty, and the nation stand behind the troops.
No, we don't.
We may not like the policies in the
The
government.
nation does not stand behind the British government's policy in Iraq and Afghanistan. The opinion polls have always shown most people are against the war in Afghanistan.
But the nation
So we're
stand
not
behind the
behind it.
troops.
Yes,
But regardless
Yeah,
of,
I understand
of
that.
ethics, would you say that if the country, for whatever reason, sent its troops to just kill innocent people, let's say in China, just for the sake of it, would you still stand by on principle just out of patriotism, or would you call into account some kind of moral standard and say, look, this is
We're there
wrong?
with epic divide here, because we're not warmongers. The country,
But you know that WMD was never found. I mean, this is the thing. We really need to get to the heart of the matter. And a lot of it is foreign policy related. It is. So that should never happen in Iraq in the first place, or Afghanistan.
it was an issue over oil. I still believe it was over oil,
Right,
national
right.
monetary
Can you-
values. Now, if you actually look at it, the reason they went in, I read an article recently that the EU, the Iraq, were actually planning to change from the dollar a barrel over to the EU and sell their oil by the European Monetary Fund, and that's the reason that America went in and
Right,
organised
sure.
the war. So I do see those aspects of it, but no matter who decides the policies, at the end of the day, our troops are out there. They need full 100% support behind them. And when we see...
Can I ask you, do you respond to his question? That's an excellent question. Are British troops tomorrow, it's a hypothetical, it's a fantasy question, but nevertheless it illustrates an important principle. We decide to invade China, okay? And we kill hundreds of thousands of civilians. Will you still say my country right or wrong then? I won't. I'll say this is wrong. We should not be doing. Troops should not be.
I would say the policies are wrong, but I would still support the troops.
Really, that is
How do you
quite.
support the troops? They're doing a good job, and
I would still value those troops. A soldier goes where he's told in life. He doesn't make the policies. He goes out as fights, as loyal to the country and to the other guys in
So
the
if a
unit.
soldier kills an innocent person abroad or rapes an innocent woman in another country,
No,
you will still
you're
stand.
saying rape.
so
They're not rapists.
But
and not
fine, but
murderers.
no,
That's wrong. This is the whole argument that came out.
hypothetically,
Abu Ghraib tortures, mass torturing of people in Iraq. Do you condemn the troops who did that in Abu Ghraib prison in Iraq? These are troops that did this.
These are individuals.
It
It's
was
not the troops.
systematic. It was systematic torture. This has been found out by the United Nations. Condemn the troops who did that.
People who torture people unnecessarily when they've been secured as a... Yes, I do.
Right, so you can't make that distinction between troops doing good things and troops doing bad things. That's all we're doing. We're not condemning troops per se, but so troops sometimes do evil things, torture systematically thousands of people. Abu Ghraib.
Again, we're talking about a minority of them. We're talking...
Yeah, but the principle's there,
such
the
a small
principle's there.
number. You cannot condemn the whole of the British Army just because of what a few have done.
True. But nevertheless, you do say that troops can do bad things and you can condemn them when they do.
I'm a soldier myself, and I've been through the atrocity it was. I was in the South African conflict back in the 19s, and war takes it out, takes a man to the lowest form that he can actually be, and it's a means of survival. And for them guys to survive out there, them troops to survive, they need to know that the people are behind them. And how do you think those troops feel when they come back and they see that they've had Islamists calling them murderers and baby killers and stuff like that?
Sure. I mean,
It's going to radicalise the troops, and these are English troops. They're going to think stuff the
True,
government.
but how do
and they're
you
gonna
feel
line
when
English
British
schools.
troops in the name of the Queen go to come and massacre hundreds of thousands of people?
It's not gonna
What
happen.
happens is some Muslims get very, very upset. We all do. I'm upset, but some take it a step further and decide, well, we're going to show the British people who elected these governments by blowing up the underground
it's
system.
snowballing.
You see, exactly. That's the point. Do you understand the link between our foreign policy policy and extremism, albeit very small extremism, in the Muslim community. Do you see the connection?
Yes, I do.
Right.
But where is the fault of the foreign policy?
It is.
It's the socialists.
No, the government isn't. Tony Blair wasn't socialist.
Oh, come on.
So do we agree then? Do we agree really at the heart of the matter, the cause is really political rather than racial and rather than religious?
Of course it's political.
Right.
Taking the political voice away
So
from the English.
why is it suddenly it's become a voice against Islam as a religion rather than a political problem?
No one in the English Defence League, from the admin, from what I've spoken to, now I'm not a part of the admin team as I've stated clearly, but none of them are against Islam as a religion. They all oppose, and they rally those lads behind them, opposing Sharia law and extremism.
I must disagree with you. I'm not going to quote reams of evidence, but I have the evidence here of numerous EDL supporters in the public domain saying Islam is the enemy. Some even want to bomb Mecca, believe it or not, with a nuclear weapon. I have the evidence here if you want to read it.
Would you say that's counterproductive?
Do you see that's counterproductive?
These are individuals.
But there's a lot of them.
So do you think what you're doing then perhaps is actually, it's not really trying to solve the problem, it's actually just creating extremists on your side, just as we've got extremists on our side, and there has to be another solution, alternative solution. We need to sit down like this, have an open discussion and really get to the heart of the matter. What really are the causes? And let's try to do away with these blurring issues. Is it racial? Is it religious? As you said, you've no problem with someone going to a mosque.
I'll tell you what the main cause is, what I find in England is that they're trying to divert from one nation and one legislative system. We need one law for all in this country, and that's how it's going to stay. But within the law, we need to get rid of political corruption, which we've seen in the last elections. I mean, I've never seen such a farcical elections in my life.
It's true.
It's like,
I agree.
And now we're having to invite, you've got the Labour Party and the Conservatives fighting over who's going to incorporate the Liberal Democrats. Now, these are again a minority bringing in extreme socialist values. And I mean, for instance, open borders and giving all illegal immigrants a British passport and sifting through them and giving them status here. Why are we having to bow to this?
Yeah. Also, can I ask you on that point as well? If the country, if the government is going to open its borders to foreigners, and obviously a lot of foreigners are going to come here to find a better life, that's just a natural instinct.
You can't blame the people who wanted a better life.
Exactly. So
you've got to blame the government for letting them in.
So rather than pointing at all these foreigners who are here, and also, I mean, a lot of the foreigners, let's not forget, are from Eastern Europe. There are a lot of Poles, the Slovakians. Anybody who wants a better life, if they find it somewhere else and the borders are open to them, they will go there. It's not the fault of the people. It is the fault of the foreign policy. It's the fault of the government. So rather than venting your anger at the people who just want a better future, just like you and I, let us really, understand the issue and not get personal. And that is the problem. Otherwise, we're just going to end up killing each other.
Okay, I agree with that respect. In that respect, give the English people a referendum on retracting out of the EU.
I would love to, but I don't have that power, unfortunately.
We need a political system where there are more referendums, where major issues like going to war we can put to referendum and ask the people in general. And we go on the rules of majority. But at the moment we've got minority governments, and even the last government that was in place, to Gordon Brown, he was never elected as a Prime Minister. He's only ever been elected in Scotland. He hasn't been voted for and supported in this current, but now he's squatting in number 10 and refusing to go on the hope that the Lib Dems are going to back him up. And it's totally wrong. Our political system needs changing. The English need a voice.
Absolutely, but that's not the fault of the Muslims. This is where the problem is really, it's going. A lot of the problems, which is down to the government policies and the institution, the way that the establishment works, is nothing to do with us, but we're somehow being targeted and victimized. Like I said,
victimized. No,
but the thing is, look, no one's trying to impose Sharia law on non-Muslims. This is something that needs to be really clarified. I'm not saying to you, I want your wife to wear the burqa, for example. Of course not.
I agree with you.
No way.
Why do you need to come into England? We have an established lawyer. Why do you feel the need that you need to go and arbitrate matters within your faith in your mosque instead of going to one of our courts?
Because one of the values that English people believe in, I believe in, is religious freedom of expression. And just like
religious freedom, not
Bill,
political freedom of expression.
You're interrupting. Just like Catholics can go to Catholic tribunals and have their matrimonial issues sorted out, just like Jews have exactly this very, very similar courts to the Sharia courts that you alluded to, Muslims also, in a diverse society that respects different religions, also have that freedom. I fear that your approach would mean a totalitarian state where religions are suppressed, Catholics as well as Jews and Muslims.
And that's
not England. That's not England.
Politically, yes. If you've got a political value, go to the ballot box and vote.
But you see,
But
it's
you're
not just
not
about the
trying to
ballot box.
impose-
It's about people,
You cannot
Jews,
impose
Catholics
politics
and Muslims
for
allowing...
a religious...
No, but
facility.
you're a bit late for this, because the last 1,500 years of English history, Christianity has been part of English common law. Now you're saying it shouldn't be. That's not England, that's republicanism. That's nothing to do with English values. That's a minority voice you've got. I'm sticking up for traditional English values when I say that the law should recognise Christianity, Judaism, Catholicism and Islam and allow people to settle their matrimonial disputes in front of tribunals. You're saying do away with the English values,
But
do
now
away with
we're
English
treading
history
back on over-
and have
over
a
old ground.
republican model. That's not an English way, that is the French way.
How do we know
You're
how
more French.
Sharia law is conducting itself behind closed doors unless it's open?
It's not closed doors, it is open. Have you been to a mosque before? I invite you now to come to Regent's Park Mosque, okay, to meet the imam there and find out from him how he conducts his business. Will you come to Regent's Park Mosque at my invitation and meet these people?
I'm willing to come along
Excellent.
and have a look.
Good.
But then I understand that if I see something that I find untoward, that I am going to speak
Absolutely.
on
Of course,
Well,
of
see,
course.
maybe this is a practical step in
course.
the right direction. Really, what we need, if you genuinely are afraid of the way that it's going, or what the understanding of Sharia law is, perhaps we need to make more of an effort to, extend a hand and say, look, you don't have anything to be afraid of. We don't want to take away your rights. We don't want to take away.
And that's what I did. When my views weren't too dissimilar to yours, I went to my local mosque. I walked through the door on my own initiative with a bit of fear and for what are these people like, and talked to people and learnt and read the Quran and learnt about real Islam. And I invite you to go on a similar journey and learn about real Islam.
No, you can never get me on a similar journey because I do have my values, and my values
You can have
are...
your values, but I want you to acquire knowledge, or accurate knowledge about Islam, not knowledge that is based on distorted media stereotypes. So that's my invitation.
Yeah, I suppose the most we could expect is just tolerance on all sides. Tolerance on all sides, and that is fundamental to our
But
survival.
then the English
understanding
need to be
as well.
tolerated as well. We need to be
Absolutely.
tolerated for our values.
Yeah, but the assumption is
It's
that we
like-
don't tolerate your values.
We
That's
do
the
tolerate
problem.
them.
Of course
We do tolerate them.
But you see, this is the thing. The fear has been stoked up by the media because of a handful of extremists. But you speak to 99% of Muslims, they don't really mind. They don't care what you do in your home. You can be gay, you can be a socialist, you can be a fundamentalist Christian. But we don't have a problem with that. We just want to exercise
But
our...
I thought Islam was against homosexuality.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Most
It is,
but we're not,
as is the Catholic Church, the Orthodox Church, as is the Anglican Church. We share these values. Unfortunately, England is moving away from its traditional Christian values, which are also Islamic values and Jewish values, into a kind of permissive, free
My point was, how many Muslims do you see going out there and gay bashing? You don't. Because we understand that we're a minority in this country. It's not our place to make those changes. However, if we had a proper Islamic state somewhere else in the Middle East or wherever, and that was ruling by Islam and Sharia, yes, there will be certain laws that will be implemented, but that will not affect you and it will not infringe on your rights. You see.
Now we're coming down to the nitty-gritty.
Right, exactly.
But if you had a majority in areas, like under the EU, right, let's look at it this way. Now, we're going into the EU. Now, the EU intention is to divide England into 8 regions. In some of those regions, like Birmingham, certain parts of London, you will have a Muslim voting majority, because that is where the Muslims have congregated. Do you think it right that in those 8 regions, if there's a majority Muslims, then that region should be run by Sharia law?
I think it will be chaotic. Personally, I think it will be chaotic.
No,
I'd like your
well,
opinion
my
on
answer is
this.
no, because Sharia law applies in an Islamic state. It doesn't apply in a region. I actually live in France as well. I have a home there. There are regions like in the Dordogne region where there's a majority of English people, and the councils then there have elected English people, okay, to conduct business and to rule that area, if you like, in the Dordogne region in south central France. Now, no one's objecting to that. I don't object to that. I imagine some people, French people, feel a bit iffy about that. But if we do it in those countries, there's no reason why Muslims can't be elected to local authorities here to represent Muslim interests. But that's not the same as having Sharia law imposed, which only happens in an Islamic state. And Britain is not an Islamic state and probably never will be. So there's a distinction.
How do you feel about England being divided? As an Englishman, you said to me you're an English patriot. How do you feel about England being divided into 8 separate regions?
I actually changed my views about the European Union since I've lived in France, and I have a different view. I used to be very nationalistic like you. I see things differently, partly because I'm a Muslim, partly because I now live on the continent as well. So I see things slightly differently. I'm not quite so sharp on this that I used to be. So I don't like the unrepresentative nature of the European Commission, where the commissions are not elected. The European Parliament seems to be way detached from the European people. But these are the major issues that confront us. What confronts me as a Muslim is English foreign policy. I worry about EDL being a resurgence of a kind of fascism
I beg to
we
differ,
had in the
because
1930s.
they are issues. We're having laws dictated us from EU of how we should handle our society and laws we should impose on people.
Once again, that's not the fault of the Muslims. This is my fear.
I know it
you see what I'm
isn't.
saying? But it's going to be taken out on the Muslims ultimately.
But I
which
can't
is
see. What I'm saying is, again, we're not seeing Muslims standing up and disagreeing with it. They're just taking, and like just like letting everything flow, and like everything that's in their favour, everything that's in the Muslim, everything that is in the Muslims' favour, they're accepting. The minute anything is against Islam, then we see mass demonstrations.
My understanding is we've just had 2 Muslim MPs elected in the Birmingham area. Many Muslims are actively involved in politics, in opposing British foreign policy, supporting the Palestinians, for example, and fighting for social justice, not just for Muslims, but for all people in this country. So I don't recognise what you're saying. Campaigning against racism, campaigning against unfair treatment of prisoners who are arbitrary people arrested under terrorism laws. Where many Muslims are actively involved in justice issues in this country. You won't read that if you read the Daily Mail or the Daily Express
or the Sun.
Or the Sun. But if you put your ear to the ground and listen to Muslims, you will notice it happening. But it's not reported in the Daily Express.
There are a lot of moderate Muslims who are doing a lot of work behind the scenes. We've got our problems.
See, this is where I can't define between them. But I can't see how Islam as a faith using a political ideal such as Sharia law can be separated. I just don't see how it's separated.
But Sharia law covers all aspects of life. As I said, it's how we worship, how we pray, the food we eat. It's not just about the penal things.
Your religious aspects of it should cover that.
Yeah. You see, if you want a kind of Western religion, inverted commas, because all these religions come from the Middle East. Christianity comes from the Middle East. Islam comes from the Middle East. Judaism comes from the Middle East. They're all
we don't regard as a Christian. We don't regard baptism as being part of the law.
They're all from abroad.
Okay.
If you look at, say, Judaism, Orthodox Judaism, the way they talk about their Sharia law, and they have a Sharia law, halakha law, very similar to Islam. So you would have to be consistent and reject other faiths as well, let alone Hinduism and Sikhism. You'd have to be...
Okay.
Yeah.
Paul, sorry, we have to wrap up. Unfortunately, the show's going to end in a few seconds. So I'd like to spend the last few seconds by asking Bill and Paul to sum up really the main points in a nutshell, and then we'll end it at that. Bill, if you'd like to...
Well, from today's debate, I think there's been a good few points talked about. But I still believe that the English Defence League as an organisation and many other organisations out there will continue to grow until the politicians recognise there is a problem in this country and until Muslims start standing up and getting out and protesting against the extremists in their ranks. We are demonstrating with virtually like said to the CA team we don't want you around, we've said to the BNP that we don't want you around, you don't represent us, and we proved that in the recent elections.
Sure. Okay.
But we want Muslims to now get up and get rid of the radicals in their ranks as well.
Thank you very much. Paul Williams, final words?
Yeah, again, just to reiterate, I want to reassure you and any other English non-Muslims watching that you have nothing to fear from Muslims. We do not want to impose Sharia law on you. You can carry on eating pork and carry on drinking alcohol, gambling, whatever you do. Sharia law is only, and all the scholars say this, Islamic scholars, only for an Islamic state. It does not exist in Britain. If it were to exist in the Middle East, that would be a different matter. You have nothing to fear from us. And the causes of extremism, unfortunately, amongst some Muslims, is directly related to the British government's occupation of Muslim lands in the Middle East and Afghanistan. We need to address that problem rather than blaming often poor and illiterate Muslims in the East End of London. They're not the criminals, it's the British government who are committing these acts. So direct your fire at them, not at us. Please.
Thank you very much. So if I can wrap up as well with a few final words. First of all, I'd like to thank Bill and Paul very much for coming down. I think it's been a very fruitful discussion. It's certainly helped me to understand where you're coming from, and obviously understand where you're coming from, Paul. And I think it's a right step in the right direction. We really need to, no matter how much we might disagree with each other, the only way we can achieve any kind of understanding or we can go forward and to reconcile our differences is by coming together and openly and honestly discussing the problems we have. I mean, it is very, very important that members of EDL and people who agree with them are given a platform to air their grievances and to air their frustrations and their anger, and they need an outlet to vent those emotions. Otherwise, if it's pent up, it will just explode into violence, and the same can be said for Muslims as well. And ultimately, that is the problem. We're not really given a chance and an opportunity on mainstream TV to talk about the real issues at hand, to talk about politics, to talk about religious differences. And I hope this is a step in the right direction. Once again, I'd like to thank you, Bill, very much for coming down. It's been a pleasure having you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
And thank you, Paul. And that was...
Nice to meet you, Bill.
And that you have been watching the Alternative Platform, and that's it for today.